Hi, all. Here we are, week 10. Moving forward, now we're going to start to really get into hominid evolution, which includes things like non-honing chewing and bipedalism, and then our kind of early ancestors in terms of our bipedal ancestors. So, what is a hominid in terms of definitions? Um, Hominids usually, most of the time, have sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism, remember, is a difference between body build and size between biological sexes, male and female, differences in physicality. Bipedalism, we'll get into a discussion on pros and cons in a second. Um, and then benefits and problems to bipedalism and some of the hominid evolution stuff. Non-honing chewing. This picture describes non-honing chewing. We essentially have non-honing chewing, which means we don't have a diastema, and you can see with the picture of this gorilla here or chimp that they have space for their upper canines to fit in between kind of their premolars and lower canine. We don't have that, so our teeth just kind of match together, which is a different type of chewing, and it relates to jaw, cranial structure, and vertebrae structure as well, and where our foramen magnum is located. Um, we will talk about the 7 biological aspects of bipedalism, and which are energy efficiency, the foot. So energy efficiency, before I move on to the foot, is essentially as humans walk, we are like 73% more efficient in terms of energy consumption than knuckle walking apes and even most quadrupeds. So we are highly efficient in that biological sense. Our foot also changes in terms of bipedal. Our arch and our foot moves this way, right? So essentially our foot looks like this. An ape's foot looks like this, which is very much, they kind of waddle more than they walk. Our foot is set up to actually springboard us off bipedally. Our knees are shaped in a way that bends kind of more vertically, straight up and down, rather than kind of cross-sectioned or the extreme version of a Q line. Our limbs, so our legs in particular, again, our femurs and our lower leg bones, tibia and fibula are essentially also aligned with our knee in order to create bipedalism. Our hips and pelvis also, they tend to be not like the apes, which are they're kind of, the apes are vertical for vertical climbing. Ours tend to be more horizontal, shaped out, so that they can support the weight of our body on top of us or on top of our legs. The vertebrae, again, is an S-shaped. And then it also, because it holds the weight of our body, and it's the only way that we can really maintain balance. And then also then the skull, the foramen magnum, the way that the hole that where our spine goes into our cranium is essentially underneath our skull to hold up our cranium. And in apes and other quadrupeds, the foramen magnum moves behind the skull. So again, like in cats and dogs, the hole from the spinal cord into the brain or into the cranium is from behind to hold up the head quadrupedically. We're trying to be balanced upright. So those are the 7 main biological aspects of bipedalism. Positives and benefits of bipedalism. Usually we focus on just the positives. I'm also going to run into some negatives here. Some of the positives are that we can see over tall grass. So our early ancestors could have been upright to see over tall grass, and usually this is associated with looking at predators. It would also been a benefit to be able to spot food sources. But the predator thing is also one of those things. And then if you slide over to the negative side of this slide, you can see that predators can also see us because now our heads are above the grasses. So that is a negative. We also have, as bipeds, we are better endurance runners. And what I mean by that is long distance running. So this is why humans can run marathons and quadrupeds have a harder time with that. Essentially, human beings early on, and some of our hunter-gatherer ancestors or relatives, even in Africa today, run down quadrupedal herbivores. And it's because they're not able to eliminate their heat, and they pretty much burn out. So they are equipped for sprints and fast-paced running, which we are not. So that ends up on the negative side for us as well. Yes, people can sprint, but it's not to the degree of a quadruped at all. But where we do excel is our endurance running and our ability to eliminate heat. Some of the other negatives that show up are varicose veins, and this is due to gravity and pressure of the body being put on all of your legs, and just two legs. And with that two leg thing, I probably should have put it on here as a negative is if you have a major injury to one of your legs, you're pretty much immobile. With a quadruped, they could have an injury to a leg and still kind of survive and live on three legs. So the adherence to just having two legs becomes problematic if you have injuries also. Back problems, again, this is due to stress and or weight being put onto your back. That S-curve spinal column can be problematic in that if your back isn't responding to holding the weight, then it's essentially going to buckle, and some of your discs within your vertebrae and stuff like that get messed up in association with that issue. Knee problems as well. Many times people burn their knees out, and knee replacements are now a thing. But those would also be associated with overuse and or weight issues on being on the knees too much. This also has to do with workload and how much we work. Human beings weren't actually built to do as much intensive work that we do in terms of being on our feet all day, or even sitting in a chair all day. Those kinds of things are not associated with healthy human biology, to be honest. And the last positive that we need to really discuss is the full-time use of our hands. So once we're bipedal, we get full-time use of our hands, which means now we can manipulate things. We can carry tools, we can carry food, we can carry infants. And that full-time use of the hands is probably the most revolutionary thing that starts to speed up our change in terms of our brain, our cranial capacity, our overall biological evolution. That feedback loop between us using our hands, now we're using fire to cook our food, we're making tools, we're playing, we're doing all kinds of interesting things now with our hands, and we're able to almost start to control the natural world with our hands, right? Where other animals, they can do it, but they can't actually have full-time use of it. So it's the full-time use of standing upright and moving and being able to carry stuff that really starts to free up some of that evolutionary kind of development. And I think once we get into bipedalism, which is very much a hominid trait, that's when the speed up or the evolutionary kind of apparatus really starts to jettison forward. So the hypothesis of hominid emergence, this is going to be important in terms of a hint. Darwin's hunting hypothesis, his idea was that bipedalism freed up the hands to use tools to hunt for meat. And this is led by hominid adaptations and change. Now, I should tell you that a lot of this is a Eurocentric ideology to some extent, in that the idea of hunting meat is vitally important to European culture, at least in terms of Darwinian evolutionary thought. Most hunter-gatherer foragers were plant eaters. They did not rely on an overabundance of meat. And in fact, meat eating had happened among our ancestors a long time ago, but they weren't hunting, they were scavenging. So there's some interesting kind of things there. Rodman and McHenry's patchy forest hypothesis, this is also the idea of savannas. This has been given a lot of attention. Many times the forests, through climate change and geological upheaval in terms of volcanic activity, would have created a situation where the forest becomes patchy and savannas fill in. So the trees are basically dying out. So arboreal adaptation is no longer necessary, and terrestrial adaptation is. So what we get with the patchy forest hypothesis is that greater efficiency in certain habitats for bipedalism. So essentially, being in the savannas, being able to upright, walk, and see over grasses, and use your hands for gathering food in the savannas, and then also picking fruit from the trees, creates the reason for bipedalism. And I believe in the videos that I've posted for this week, they talk about it fairly extensively. Lovejoy's provisioning hypothesis. I believe I've posted a video also of Lovejoy. His idea here is that then the father could provide food for the mother and have more kids, which required fathers to be able to carry food. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan, and I don't know that the field is a huge fan of Lovejoy's provisioning hypothesis. This is a patriarchalistic or patriarchal kind of ideology around males helping females. In many indigenous cultures, we see that women, from kind of almost right after giving birth, carry their child with them, either on cradle boards or inside their parkas or their clothing, and they continue to work. So it's not that women are suddenly, seen as sick when they have children in indigenous cultures like they do in the West. So this ideology is kind of an interesting one. It's very androcentric or male dominating. I would say that the first two tend to get a lot of attention in the field. But again, I'm showing you some videos, so you'll find out that there's some different kind of ideas coming out about why bipedalism or hominids actually emerge. So the first hominins, which is what we're calling pre-Australopithecines. Australopithecines represent kind of this large group over this time period of kind of almost 4 million to 2 million time period. And we have a lot of fossil evidence of them. The issue is we didn't have in the field a lot of evidence for what we would call maybe what people have referred to as the missing links. And really now we do. So different scientists, paleoanthropologists have been out hunting for these different fossils and looking for kind of the precursor to Lucy, who was bipedal. And the precursor may have been able to be in the trees, but also walk bipedally rather than knuckle walking like the apes do. So this was really kind of the goal for the field for a very long time. And they end up finding Tacadensis, which is dated. And Tacadensis is an interesting one because it's found in more on the western side of the Rift Valley and Olduvai. So Tacadensis is 7 to 6 million years ago. The brain was more ape-like, but likely bipedal, and they had non-honing chewing complex. So this is an interesting one. Again, you're going to learn a lot about these species on the videos. The videos themselves, listening to the scientists talk about them is much more impressive than myself. Tungenensis, bipedal at 6 million years ago. But the hands were curved like apes, so they could spend time in the trees. So again, these two are really old ancestors that are looked at as kind of that missing link where they were in the trees like apes. They had more ape-like brains, but then they were bipedal on the ground and they could walk like, maybe they didn't have the same gait as us because our gait changes over time. But they were definitely bipedal. They were not knuckle walking. Ardipithecus cadaba and Ardipithecus rhamidus are also another two. These both are found around kind of the 4.85 million years ago time period up through kind of 4. And they are interesting. Again, there's been a lot of recent research on them. They spent time in the trees, and they also would have been bipedal. There's debate whether or not how much time they spend in the trees, but again, they move towards this bipedalism, and you can watch some of the video on this as well. Middle awash is a good hint. In Ethiopia, it provides continuous hominin evolution for 6 million years ago, all the way up to Homo sapiens. So middle awash is this fantastic site that essentially ancestors and people and relatives for 6 million years have had either buried their dead there, put their dead there, or the dead ended up there in this same location for a continuous time span. So when people say, oh, but these are all out of context, middle awash really gives us this stacked up version of what that looks like. And I'll attach some more reading on Middle of Wash as well.